Hi, Ricketts Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business experts to review the morning newspapers, find out what's going on in their own individual business, their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's punchline. But we're not going to do any of that today. We're just going to talk about the election. So hopefully you're interested as much as we are. Okay, so who have we got today? We've got Neill Ricketts, Chair of the Forest Dean Economic Partnership, and he's the graphene guru. We've got Ian Mean, Director of Business West and ex-editor of the Citizen Echo and Western Daily Press. And finally, we've got Sam Holliday, Business Development Manager for the Federation of a Small Business and ex-editor of the Bath Chronicle. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. We're going to go straight in and see what's making the headlines. So, courtesy of the BBC that we've discovered don't like the sun today for some reason. The Metro, Rishi's bumpy takeoff. The Financial Times, Sunak makes faltering election start. The Daily Express, Rishi lashes out. Starmer hasn't the courage to face me on television, says Rishi. Smoking ban dropped as snap election also stops help for renters, say the I. And The Guardian, Sunak begins election campaign by abandoning flagship policies. The Mirror, Brewers oops. The Daily Mail, Tories to cut green levies on fuel bills. The Times, energy bills tumble in first big election battle. And the Daily Star, the general ejection as everybody is booking holidays. I think it's going to be a long 6 weeks somehow. Okay, I can tell you what, start with you today, Neill. Okay, let's start with you. Is Rishi right to call the election now? And we'll just go around the panel quickly.
So I don't think there's any right time for Rishi to call an election. I think he's got a tough job. I think would I have stood in the rain? And I mean, it was almost kind of he was willing us to feel sorry for him. But if he can't organise an umbrella, I'm not quite sure he should be running the country. Do you? I mean, it didn't look a particularly great advocate. Now, I'm a centre politics type of person. I think we should do everything in moderation, and I'm I try to remain as apolitical as possible. But to call an election whilst you're in the middle of the post office trial or inquiry, you've got the blood scandal going on, you've got Rwanda. Has he made this easy for himself? I'm pretty sure he hasn't, to be honest. I think all of this, doesn't reflect pretty well on the current government, even though it wasn't the current government's fault. So I would have thought he would have wanted to have stayed in power for as long as possible and rode it out until January. And I think that's the advice I'd be giving him. So that would be what I would say.
Okay, Sam, what do you reckon? Was he right to call it now? I mean, he took everybody by surprise.
Yeah, well, I think Neil hit the nail on the head at the start, really. I mean, when is a good time to call it? I mean, funnily enough, I was at an event yesterday, talking to some business people, and there's always that one person who says, oh, yes, I knew he was going to call it for the July. I don't think so. I think he took us all by surprise. It's the one thing that prime ministers have got, isn't it? It's a power that they've got. I thought they changed it a few years ago, but that didn't last very long, to have that ability to be able to call it. But I suppose he probably knows figures more than we do. He maybe sees that the inflation might not get any lower, that maybe in the summer more boats will come over and still no one will have ended up in Rwanda. So he might have been looking at, is there a right time? But I think one's quite interesting, Mark, is that a lot of people have said in the papers and on the news that a lot of the Tory backbenchers aren't very happy with his decision. So clearly the strategy wasn't about bringing everyone together. And I feel, even looking at one of your front pages there about him wanting to challenge Keir in a one-to-one, he's going down a presidential route. I think he just wants it to be choose between one of these two people, as almost as if to say, I'll give up on the party concept. If we're going to win, it's going to be me against Keir. So maybe he thinks this is the time to go one head-to-head with Keir Starmer. Who knows?
Okay, Ian, what's your take on it? Was he right to call the election now?
He was right, definitely. Things are not going to get better. They're going to get a lot worse. When the weather improves a bit, we're going to find more people coming over on boats, not boots. That's a flagship policy. And he's actually had to admit yesterday that isn't going to happen, even if they get in before the election. So I think he's very wise to do this. My feel is that the country generally wants change, and it's important. Point here about MPs, lot of concern there. I think a lot of them have lost the plot. Remember, there's probably nearly 100 odd MPs who aren't going to stand. So I think he was right. Was he right to stand out in the rain? I didn't see a problem in that, actually. What great pictures there were. Should he have had umbrella? If he'd had an umbrella, the headlines would be, "Who's the Wally with the umbrella?"
Wally with the brolly in. That's what they said about Steve McLaren. Do you remember all those years ago, the football man?
Absolutely. So, in my view, he was right. But I think this was quite a personal decision. When you get foreign secretaries and defense secretaries about to fly off in different parts of the world, and an hour's notice, they cancel it. That means, I think, it was his view, and his view.
Well, I agree with all of you. My thing is that I think he's called it now. Yes, Neil?
Do you think he's just had enough? Do you think, I mean, who would want to be the Prime Minister? I mean, I mean, even being an MP, you have to look at the job description and think, would I really want that? And
Well, he's got enough money, doesn't he? He doesn't need, he doesn't.
Yeah, according to the Sunday Times Rich this last week, he's richer than the king. You know, he's not doing it for that reason. That's the one thing I've always said about him, that he's not in it for his bottom line, which is what some politicians are.
He's an honest, very straightforward politician.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree.
I agree with you. I agree with you, though, Ian. What you said earlier is that I think he's called it now because the economic outlook is not looking great coming down the tracks. The Rwanda thing isn't going to work. The economic is going to, more MPs aren't going to stand. I mean, and he's running a party which isn't behind him. That's the problem he's got, and it never has been behind him. Yes, Neil.
That's the other thing is they're talking about a kind of Tory civil war, so votes of no confidence, is that also a factor?
Yeah.
And was that the overriding kind of decision to put an end to it one way or the other?
I mean, maybe that's why he's called it, isn't it? And the Tory party has been eating itself for the last 3-4 years. This is why we're in the mess that we're in. I mean, at least the economy seems to be stabilizing. Okay, let's move it on a little bit then. Okay, who had the second best day? You had them going all over the place. We had Ed Davey here in Cheltenham yesterday. So obviously Sunak was in Wales, getting the Euros wrong. So I'm going to start with you, Ian. Second day in, how's it looking?
Second day in, we've got, I think it's another 41 or 42 days to go now. On the first day, looking locally, former reporter of mine, Max Wilkinson, was in the highlight front of things because he's the parliamentary candidate for Cheltenham. And this, in fact, is an absolute key seat for the Lib Dems. Alex Chalk will probably lose his seat. He's only got a majority of about 980. So that was a big deal there. The problem with elections, day two, you've got to manufacture things. If you look at the papers this morning, the Tory-leaning Daily Mail has got, obviously, a planted story, tours to cut green levels on fuel bills. Everyone's going to look for a different angle every day. You can't keep on doing gaps. So it's going to become incredibly boring. Elections do not sell papers. They do not sell national papers. So what are we going to have today? Your guess is as good as mine.
Okay, right. Okay, over to you, Sam. What do you reckon? Who had the better day yesterday?
Well, I did go and get the papers, Mark, and I did read a piece in the a political sketch in the Times by Patrick Kidd. And he made an interesting point yesterday that Rishi Sunak went to 2 relatively safe Tory seats to be photographed and to do various things. Keir Starmer went to Gillingham, which is a target seat. They're about 15,000 votes behind. And that says to me that Keir Starmer, the Tories are trying to hold what they've got but Keir Starmer is going to go for everything. So I think the problem we've got now is that when I remember growing up when I was quite young, I've been interested in politics all my life really. We didn't have 24-hour news. There wasn't something to be filled. So you'd have like one major event a day, and you could cope with that. I don't know if anybody else did the same, but I looked on Facebook on Wednesday night, and I already saw people, some of them are quite politically engaged, saying, sick of it already. And that's the problem they've all got. And do you know what my biggest fear of this election is? I don't think the turnout's going to be great. And the reason for that is that I think there are a fair amount of people who may be a bit fed up with the Tories. But can we take our mind back to 1997, when there was a similar time when Labour was on the verge of what was considered a landslide? There was a genuine, and I'm going to say it now, there was a genuine excitement about Tony Blair. He was young, he was fresh, he was energetic, he was different. I remember a Lib Dem MP called Don Foster from Bath telling me that was almost our Barack Obama moment when he got elected. You don't feel that about Keir Starmer, do you? So I don't think there'll be a rush of people going into that poll booth to say, I really want to vote for Keir, I really want to vote for Rishi. I think there'll be a lot of people who just think, phew. And I think the turnout could be low. I think we could be in for a slightly underwhelming election.
So when it's a low turnout, who does that benefit the most? Start with you, Neill. Low turnout, who does it benefit?
I was talking to my father, not last night, but the night that it was announced on Wednesday, and the biggest factor in all of this is turnout, because with a low turnout, and I agree with Sam that we'll face a kind of kind of deluge of information over the next 6 weeks. People will just become bored and switch off, and they probably won't even vote. And they've made it so hard to vote, because you need your ID and everything, that people just go, look, I just can't be asked. And I think the percentage of turnout is actually the thing that we need to. If I was Labour, that's what I'd be focusing on. I'd be getting as many people as possible that vote Labour to turn up at the polls, because I think that's the winning strategy. I don't think it's necessarily about, I mean, our political system doesn't really make sense anyway, first past the post and all this, but we've got a massively turbulent time. We've just had the local elections. We've got a massive MPs retiring, and we've got the demographics, show that older people vote more than younger people do. So for me, the strategy would be to get more of my supporters to vote, not necessarily trying to find new supporters.
It's funny, isn't it? We're living in such a dangerous time in the world. Have you ever known? Since I was young, we had the Cold War and stuff, and that was pretty frightening. The Gulf War, when I was in that was pretty frightening. But now this is like war in Europe. We've got Donald Trump maybe coming back, which absolutely petrifies me if you want to know the truth. And you've got all these other things going on. Chinese and Taiwan,
Middle East.
the Middle East. And on top of that, we've got the climate crisis, the cost of living crisis. So it's never been more important to pick the right leader. But I don't think, but there isn't. I mean, we talked about this before we come on air, actually, Neill. Let's talk about the locals. Let's talk about the local elections. And what you said earlier, if you don't mind, which I shouldn't really repeat, well, I can't repeat, sorry, is that about the candidates. They've had 4 years to find good candidates standing in the election.
What I said was, if this was, I'd get Ryan Reynolds to run this. What he's done with Wrexham, if he could do that with one of the political parties, then but you would do that, wouldn't you? You would spend the last 4 years trying to find your very best runners or your very best business people or your whatever it is, and I just think, everyone's talking on Wednesday, this was a surprise. Well, it was going to happen sometime between now and January. It can't be that big a surprise. And are other parties actually in a position where they can put their best candidates out there? I don't think there's no recruitment process. No one's, people don't ring up and say, would you like to be an MP? We think you do a good job. We're gonna train you, and we're gonna make sure you're prepared to be an MP, and we're gonna give you everything. We're gonna give you a promotions manager, and I just think kind of politics is something that just happens. It's almost like an accident.
Well, okay, let's talk then briefly about the current MPs, right? We'll be a bit cruel here on whether they're going to make it or not. So we all know that the main seat that's up for offer is Cheltenham. Okay, Alex Chalk, it looks like he's up against Max. Max has really upped his game over the last, couple of years, to be fair to him. He's starting to look and sound the part of an MP. And Alex Chalk himself is still popular. I think it's going to be quite close myself. But go on then, Ian. What's your calling on that particular seat?
Max Wilkinson will win, no doubt about it. The Lib Dems have got a big hole in the Cheltenham area. There's a big background here to the Lib Dems, so I don't see the issue. Alex Chalk is a very, very good MP. He's also, I think, a pretty good government minister. The Tories will find him another slot when he loses, but Max will take the seat.
All right, okay. Neil, do you agree with Ian? Sam?
I agree with Ian. The margin's too tight. It's they're in the trenches and it's very small margins, and it's whoever, unfortunately it's a selling job, isn't it? Whoever does the better selling job, and we've got a stronghold in terms of local council in Cheltenham. So I would have thought that it would be natural to follow the MP, to be honest. But I don't know Max
Okay.
personally. But I've had some dealings with Alex. I think he's a great politician. I think he's just in place.
I think the reality is, Mark, when they've done an analysis of it, I think we've got some pretty good MPs around here, regardless of party. The actual percentage of people vote for the person is very, very small. I'll refer again because it's less controversial because it's not in this area. When I was in Bath, Don Foster was loved by everybody. Everybody knew, never had a bad word to say about him. But then the Tories swept in and he was swept out. No matter whether you're a good MP or a bad MP, and I will cite Alex Chalk. I think he is very, very good. And I think he's quite an impressive guy. And I think in different periods, you could have seen him as Prime Minister. Genuinely feel that. He's got something about him. But he is going to fall victim to the fact that the Tories are going to get kicked out. I would imagine. And I think that's the truth of it, that no matter how good you work your patch for 4 or 5 years, if your party's doing bad in Westminster at the general election, different local councils tend to get in despite their party. MPs don't.
But not always, though. Sometimes local councils get absolutely slaughtered because of the national thing, really. Okay, so that's Cheltenham. Let's go over to the forest then, as you're sitting there behind loads of trees. We've got Mark Harper there. Personally speaking, I like Mark as well. He's a really good MP. He stood up against Boris. He was there in the House of Commons, wasn't he? And he stood his ground. To be fair to him, what do you reckon his chances are then, Neil?
He's got a strong margin. I think the other thing that when I was talking to my father the other day was Tory voters will vote Tory and Labour voters will vote Labour. It's very unusual for them to swap parties. I mean, they might grumble and they might stamp their feet, but ultimately, if you're a dyed in the wool Tory supporter, you're going to vote Tory. And I think it comes back to what we were just saying. The kind of person is almost irrelevant because it's about politics. I think the biggest challenge is the biggest way of saying I'm not happy is not to vote, and I think that reflects back on the turnout. And with a low voting, we know what happened in the referendum with a low number of people voting. We can see massive change, and I think that's the biggest challenge for any of the politicians is to get them to vote. Because I honestly don't think. I mean, again, I think the biggest issue is internal politics. So you have, the Conservative Party is fractured, backbenchers jumping up and down. But then I've just read, Jeremy Corbyn is causing a stir by planning to run against the Labour Party, and potentially fracturing Keir Starmer's campaign. Yeah, it's like, do you not want to be in power? Because, half the votes are half the votes. And so you could end up losing the election purely down to your own internal. And I think that's one of the big challenges for the leaders. Are they actually leaders? Are they bringing everybody along? And I do think it was a shock to some MPs that we were calling an election.
No, without a shadow of a doubt. Okay, well, so you're saying he's going to make it. Ian, Mark Harper, is he safe?
I think he'll make it. Mark, as Neil has said, is a good MP. I remember backing him some years ago, editing The Citizen. We also owned The Forester at a time when he was under pressure about forestry and all that sort of stuff. No, I think he'll survive. because he comes across as a genuine person. Yeah, I think he'll make it.
The other thing,
right, Sam.
Labour haven't actually fielded a candidate yet in the Forest of Dean either.
Well, that makes a big difference, as well. Although it's national politics, you've still got to be a good local candidate. You've still got to
You've
stick
got to
your
be
head
knocking
above
on
the
doors,
parapet.
haven't you? You've got to
You've
be
got to be knocking on doors. Okay, Sam, to you, Forrest. We got
Yeah,
another four.
I think he's got a good chance. I think the fact that we haven't factored in, which I think might affect the Forest and Stroud, is the size of the Green vote. Because a lot of Labour people who are slightly disillusioned with the way they're going will go Green. I think a lot of more centrist Tories will go Green. I think there's a lot of Greens in the Forest. We've seen that with the local council, and it depends how that affects the vote. If the Greens take more away from the left, then Mark Harper is safe. But if disillusioned Tories who can't face voting Labour think they'll vote Green, then it could go the other way. So I think it's more in the balance than the other guys.
Right, okay, that's really interesting. That brings us very nicely over to Stroud. Now that you've mentioned the Greens, obviously very, very strong over there. So we've got Siobhan Bailey, who's again a very, very good constituent MP, I always think, and extremely nice person as well. What do you think her chances are then? I'll start with you, Ian, this time. Siobhan Bailey.
Right, she's a good MP. She appears more. I think the Stroud News and Journal this week had about 8 pictures of her throughout the edition. I think she may be swept away. The Greens are very, very strong there. You may remember that David Drew lost his seat in a previous election. David was an excellent MP. There's a big rump of Labour supporting people in the Stroud area. We've seen the sort of constituents a lot of them are in whether it's Stop Oil or whatever. So I think there could be quite a shock there. I think her majority is about 3,200. She's really excellent, but I think she's under pressure.
Okay, now I'm going to go quickly round. Sam, Siobhan.
I agree with that. I've got a lot of time for Siobhan. She's very pro-business as well, which I like. I think that the on paper she should go. When you look at all the polls, the percentages, everything, she should lose a seat. But maybe her hope is that the Labour Party has been a bit fractured over there in recent years. The Greens are incredibly strong, and so again, if you like, the left-leaning electorate has got a good choice between Labour and the Greens. And if it splits, then the Tories might sneak through. But yeah, I mean, I feel a bit sorry for her because I think she's done a really good job. It's quite unusual to have a Tory in Stroud, I think, when you look at the nature of Stroud, and she's battled, she's done well, but it all depends. To me, the Greens are really. If Bell Vince had stood for the Greens, I think we could have had a really interesting battle.
Yeah, I don't think he'd win though.
No, he's.
Anyway, let's move on from that one. Neil, very quickly, Siobhan. I don't know if you know Siobhan Bailey at all, but
yeah, no, I've worked with her. I think we did some stuff over at Stroud College with her. I think she's a great MP, and I think she's done a good job while she's been there. I think she might benefit from the first past the post politics. I think it would be tight, very small margins, very small majority. And it's all down to, as Sam says, what happens between the Greens and the Labour. I think the Tories will vote Tory, and I think there'll be a bun fight for the rest of it. And that's the way it is.
okay, right. Well, let's go to Lawrence Robinson then, over in Tewkesbury. So we don't hear very much of him really. He sort of keeps his head down, doesn't he? He keeps his head down as much as possible. What do you reckon then, Sam? What do you reckon his chances are? You think he was a pretty safe seat, wouldn't you?
He's got a big majority. It would take something seismic to lose him, I think. I mean, if you were a betting man and you're thinking which Tory is going to survive, I think he'd be the one. Tewkesbury, or whatever they're going to call it in the future, Mark, because they keep wanting to mess around with the name, don't they? But it's as blue as I think our area has got. So I think, put it this way, if the Tories were to lose Tewkesbury, then they're barely going to have any seats in the House. So my bet.
Okay. Right, okay. Ian, do you agree with Sam?
Yeah, agree entirely. 25,000 odd majority, but perhaps our most ineffective MP. Actually, he's not
okay.
liked. He spends a lot of time doing other things apart from pure politics. And my experience of him over quite a few years is not good. But the voters it's not they don't like him, they just vote Tory.
Yeah, I think so. I totally agree. Not about the other stuff, personal stuff. Neil,
I was
what do
just
you
waiting
reckon?
to bring Lawrence onto the call. No, we're not bringing Lawrence onto the call. Yeah, waited slightly there. No, I think it's a safe seat, and I think big majority. Very hard to see the Green candidate, who's an ex-RAF police officer, having a massive impact over what is a Tory stronghold. And I think it's something. I think it was something like a 20% swing required in order to make a change. So I would have thought that that's a relatively safe
Yeah.
seat. And
You can't imagine him. You can't imagine him with his letter saying I'm gonna step down now somehow. I think he's going to be there for the long haul, isn't he? Really?
he loves
Okay.
it. Doesn't he? He loves politics. He loves being the MP. He loves the politics. He's not going to stand down. Is my
Yes.
experience.
Okay, then in the Cotswolds, well, yeah, I forgot his name now.
Jeffrey Clifton Brown. But it's changed, isn't it,
Yes.
Mark? Isn't it 2 seats now? Isn't it
Yeah,
North
it's 2 seats now.
Yeah.
It's going to
Yes,
be
it
North,
is.
North Wiltshire,
So, Brown.
James Gray.
Yeah. That's right.
Okay, so is that going to make a big impact then on it as well? Or again, in the Cotswolds, is he pretty safe? I'm going to go back to Neil. Neil, what do you reckon? Yes or no? Pretty safe or going?
A big majority, I think, for his North Cotswold seat, he should be an absolute no-brainer. I think I just don't see how you're going to upset the likes of the Cotswolds by bringing in a potential challenger. I think it will be tighter than it has been. I think the Greens will make an impact, or the Lib Dems, sorry, will make an impact there. But I struggle to see how he's going to lose his seat, to be honest.
Okay, I think we're all going to be pretty much on agreement of that one because I'm
The only
running
thing
out
I'd
of
say about
time.
that, Mark,
Running out of time.
the only thing I would say is that because it's a new makeup of a seat, that makes it a little bit more uncertain. And don't forget, the Cotswold District Council is Lib Dem run.
Lib Dem.
The Lib Dems are probably stronger in that part of the world than we would perhaps think a few years ago. So I think Jeffrey Clifton Brown will win, but like Neil says, I think it'd be tighter. And the Lib Dems are getting stronger. There's got some good people over there.
Yeah, they've got some very good people. I totally agree with you as well, and council there. Ian, I think we're on the same page there. So let's go over to Richard Graham then, because as you all know, I think very highly of Richard. I think personally, he's been a fantastic constituent MP. Done a lot for the city and also for his trade as a trade envoy as well. So, but will he make it? Will he make it through? So I'm going to give that to Sam first. It's a 10,000 majority. Is that enough? That's the question.
Well, I think I'm just going to look at the national scene. If all the polls are right, then Gloucester is a winnable Labour seat. And I think Richard Graham is a good MP. He's very good locally. He's well respected, I think. And I think he will put up a good fight. I'm already seeing signs of that. I think he's really going to go for it. But if the polls are to be believed, we could have a new MP. But who knows? Who knows? I think that's probably the most interesting of our 6 in many ways, because I can't really call it.
No, okay. Neil, what do you reckon? Richard, yes, no?
Yes, yeah, I think he's in. I think it'd be very hard to get rid of him. I think I think the majority will shrink. I think it'll be fought out for second place and not necessarily for first place. I think Richard's done a good job of not alienating his constituency. I think he's a great MP. He's always been very helpful to me, and I think it'd be very difficult for anybody to challenge him. But I think the majority will drop considerably.
Yes. Okay, Ian, are you on the same page there? Or is he going to get a run for his money? Is it going to be tighter?
Our best MP by far will be tight, though. I think it's going to be tighter than a lot of people think.
Do you know what, Ian? I think Neil made an interesting point there, that really it's the opposition's a bit divided, because it should be a Labour seat, but Labour hasn't got many councillors in Gloucester. It's right. So had Labour swept to power in the local elections, I'd have said they would win the election. They didn't. So maybe that's Richard's best hope, really. They're going to have a divided opposition.
And the local the local Tories are in absolute disarray in terms of the councils.
It is now, yes, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think Richard has been a great MP, and it depends how Alex McIntyre, the Labour candidate, how he cuts through the with his communications next, really, and are we going to see Sir Keir Starmer down here? But that's unfortunately is all we've got time for. We've kind of run out of time already. But just quickly, what's your pick of the punchlines? We'll just do that very quickly. Sam, what have you picked out from this week's, please? We've got a minute. 30 seconds
a story
each.
that really surprised me, I must say. You said that GP services in Gloucestershire, there's been 26% more appointments at GP services since COVID. That's astonishing when you think that we've lost doctors, we've lost nurses, and yet still our surgeons have had 26% more appointments. I think that's a real impressive number.
Do you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that story because I was absolutely amazed with it as well when that came through. Neill, what's your pick of the punchlines as usual?
Well, mine was a good news story. So GE Aerospace to hire more than 900 engineers in 2024. I think that's a fantastic story. I think it brings its challenges because we haven't got 900 engineers to give them, but it shows that there are good green shoots.
That is globally, by the way, 900. It's not just Gloucestershire. Otherwise, there'd be nobody left.
No. Where are these engineers going to come from? That's the question.
Well, this is it, isn't it? That is a $100 million question. Ian, what's your pick of the punchlines, please, sir?
The new economic strategy from the county council. Neill and I have been involved in this, the LET, for some years. What interested me is actually their sub-headline in it, innovation sort of backed by heritage, which is what it's all about.
Couldn't say it better myself. Okay, my pick of the punchlines has to be the £10.2 million new Land Rover, Range Rover site just on Tewkesbury Road, Old Cheltenham Road, sorry. I think the fact that they've invested that much money goes to show that they really believe in the county and goes without saying. Anyway, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. Just want to thank my fantastic panel. Thanks, guys, for joining us today. My wonderful sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and all of you for watching. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, it's all in the punchline. Cheerio, bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
I'm trying to find the stop button.